Hello there, World Civ students. Today we're going to start Napoleon Bonaparte. You should have all the French Revolution stuff done. Again, I'm still thinking about, digitizing all those French Revolution worksheets that you did on paper so that you would just type in the responses that you wrote. But we'll see if I end up actually deciding to do that. All right, so today we're going to look at Napoleon's earlier life. All right, so, I gave you your Napoleon Bonaparte notes printed out, so you should have that in front of you, filling in the blanks as we go. There will be a couple discussion questions to answer at the end of this video, just like with the other ones. So Napoleon Bonaparte was born on August 15th, 1769 on an island called Corsica. You can actually see it there on the bottom image, pretty close off the coast of Italy. Yeah, and that's pretty much what the rest of the slide says. The people of Corsica are called Corsicans. They are fiercely independent-minded. They actually fight the French for quite a while. In fact, Napoleon's mom and dad were actually the leaders of a rebellion against the invading French army. So while Napoleon's mother was pregnant with him, they were actually fleeing through the mountains of Corsica because that rebellion had failed. Obviously, the little island of Corsica can't withstand the might of the French Empire. So before while he was in his mother's womb, they were fleeing the French army, and well, you might be surprised to learn that Napoleon is not actually French. He's Corsican. Of course, he'll be born. France will take Corsica, and his dad, they were Corsican nobles, so that makes Napoleon kind of like a French noble. He's like a lower class noble, but his dad is going to pretty much go full on, yeah, France is actually good, because France kind of treats Napoleon's dad pretty good. And Napoleon will always feel like his dad betrayed his family and Corsica because his dad ended up loving France so much. Napoleon always kind of considered his dad to be kind of a wimp and his mom to be, well, as he said, that his, la mère, his mother, what a man, right? He called his mother like a man. So, yeah, just getting right off the back there, he's from Corsica. Corsica was fighting the French where, before Napoleon was born. Corsica lost, and so his dad mostly, gave in, and suddenly, they started to like France, the dad at least. Now, Napoleon obviously will eventually come around to France, but there's a lot that happens in between that. For a lot of his young life, he really did not like France. He was pretty hardcore Corsican. Now, Corsica still owned France by the time that, when Napoleon grows up and even in his adulthood. But many rebellions will take place, one of which his father and mother participated in as rebels, as I already said. Napoleon went to military school in France at the age of 10 and joined the military after his schooling. He moved up in the ranks very quickly, and he went to military school. He actually didn't fit in very well. He had a weird accent. He wasn't very good with hygiene. A lot of people didn't really like him, and he didn't really like his schoolmates because they bullied him. But he's still very good at it, though. So he's going to move up in the ranks very quickly. And you're like, how is that possible? If he's from Corsica and everything's separated in the three estates in France. Well, again, Napoleon is a Corsican noble, and now Corsica is a part of France. So technically, Napoleon is a part of the second estate, although on the lower tier of that. So he is able to hold military, and he's able to be more than just what you might call like a private. All right, so he's going to lead many successful military campaigns, gain wide spread support because, well, he's good at winning. He is 5 feet tall and 3 inches, 5'3", which is like an inch and a half taller than my wife. So he is pretty short. I'm 5'8", so he would probably come up to, my chin. That's how tall he is. And I'm not really that tall of a person. And there's always said, well, he was tall for back then. Nope. He was short even back then. 5'3" back then would be short. You're like, but their beds, when we go to the museum on the field trip, their beds are so short. Yes, but that's because they had to sleep in beds kind of like how I'm in this recliner at an angle. Because they had fireplaces in their homes, the beds had to be kind of almost recliner-esque, right? So that the smoke from the fireplace didn't suffocate them at night. So a lot of times, the bed is flat, but their pillows were built up. So if you're sleeping in your bed as if it were a recliner, it obviously doesn't need to be as long. So yeah, 5'3" back then was indeed short, even for back then. But he will become one of the greatest military geniuses in history. He becomes a master of France in a period of only 4 years. Napoleon's first chance to excel was when he defeated delegates from the National Convention from the Royalist rebels. When the French Revolution comes about, he's going to earn a pretty good reputation for himself as a successful military commander. And we'll talk about why he supports the revolution. If he hates France so much, why is he helping them win these, against Austria and Prussia, England, Holland, all these countries that are trying to take out the French Revolution? Why does he like it? All right, so, Napoleon is actually friends with Maximilien Robespierre, who is, again, if you notice, Robespierre is kind of the leader of the French Revolution. And Napoleon and him are like distant friends with each other, very distant friends. They're kind of both aware of one another. Well, after Robespierre is killed in 1796, Napoleon is chosen by the Directory, that last form of government, the form of government after the Committee of Public Safety, with Maximilien Robespierre, after he's beheaded, the Directory is made, and that was a weak form of government. And they choose for Napoleon to lead the French army against the forces of Austria and Sardinia, and he's very successful. This is where he makes a really big name for himself. He wasn't like instantly put in charge of the French military. He's been slowly making his way up, and now he's officially like the man in charge of the French army. Now, the reason that Napoleon is so keen on France is because he really identifies with the French Revolution. He feels that, the France that attacked Corsica, the France that his father fell in love with, that is the France of the old ways. That is Louis the 16th, Louis the 15th, Louis the 14th. That's the France that used to be. The French Revolution, from Napoleon's perspective, is an enemy of the France that he hated. The France that he grew up hating was the monarchy. So when the French Revolution comes about and it's espousing all these new Enlightenment ideas and republic and voting and all these new great wonderful ideas, democracy and all that, he sees it as an enemy of the France that he grew up hating, and he sees this as a new France that he can be a part of and that he wants to be a part of. So that's why Napoleon, who grew up hating France, being Corsican, could grow up and love the French Revolution. Excuse me, what the heck was that? Grew up and loved the French Revolution. By 1799, the Directory had lost control of the political situation in France because, well, the French Revolution was crazy. And, Napoleon had several friends that say, hey, people like you. You're a military general that has a lot of victories. If you wanted to take this power, you could. And of course, he's going to take it because power is very attractive, especially to people like Napoleon. So in November of 1799, Napoleon will launch a coup d'etat, otherwise known as today as a coup. And this is a military takeover of the government, an overthrow of the government, meaning he rolls in with the military, which the Directory put him in charge of, and he takes over the government. Because if the military wants to take over the government, who's going to stop them? The military? So that's the problem with putting one man in charge of the military, especially somebody who's very popular. That's why we don't do that in America. We have the military split up in many different ways. All right, so he orders his troops to surround the national legislature to drive out most of its members. The lawmakers who remained voted to dissolve the Directory. Of course, anybody who would have opposed that were the ones that were kicked out. I don't know why, but I really like that painting. I just like it. Moving right along. In its place, the lawmakers established 3 consuls, all right, with Napoleon taking charge of the first consul. And that to say, anytime you have a Napoleon figure or really anybody that's going to become a dictator, they never just roll up and right away say, I'm your dictator, get over it. Because that's how you get assassinated. That's not how you stay in power. That's not the smart way to do it. So Napoleon is going to slowly insert himself into being emperor, because that's the thing. With any government that becomes totalitarian, a dictatorship, you can't just go in right away and say, I'm going to be your dictator. You have to slowly convince people that it's a good idea. And that's how governments work. They slowly convince people that something is a good idea. And then people, by the time they actually make policy about it, people are happy about it. That's how things like the Second Amendment get taken away. Media and politicians convince you that it's in your best interest to give away your only right to defend yourself from a tyrannical government. And once that right is gone, you will not get it back except through blood. I guarantee it. You give the government your right to liberty, to own property, to freedom of religion, freedom of speech, right to bear arms, any freedom you give the government, even if it's like, well, we're in a time of crisis right now, so we need to give up certain rights. You will not get those rights back except through blood, through revolution. It's the only way, historically, the only way. So be careful, because these people like Napoleon who come in looking for power, they know how to manipulate the masses. And historically, people like you and me are too dumb to realize what's actually happening before it's too late. So learn from history. Pay attention. Napoleon quickly takes the title of first consul for life, assumes the power of a dictator, but he doesn't call it a dictator, right? He's the first consul for life, meaning that I'm in charge of this branch of the government. There's 3 consuls, right? I'm just the first consul for life. He basically has announced, I'm president for life. And he's going to rationalize this by saying, well, these are turbulent times. We just went through the Reign of Terror, 40,000 people getting beheaded. We need some structure. We need some order, and I can do that for you. And look at all that I've done. Look at all I've accomplished. Look at how good of a leader I am. You can trust me. And people are like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's do it. So Napoleon took the title of first consul for life. This made him the supreme ruler of France, though most people in France probably didn't realize it. It's kind of like where you have a bucket of urine, but you call it Granny's peach tea. Hey, this is Granny's peach tea. Well, guess what? It's still a bucket of urine. He's going to say, oh, I'm first consul. I'm not a dictator. I'm not a dictator. But he is. See how they do that? See how they trick you into that sort of thing? well, we're going to put a fancy title on it so we can hide the truth. You know? It's like, that's a lie. And people fall for it. They really do. Because people don't want to be distraught. They don't want to hear news that's going to bother them. So if you put a fancy title on it to hide the reality, people are going to go with it. It's the simple truth. I don't know why, but I absolutely love this outfit he has. I'm not even a huge fan of velvet, but it makes me want to have like a robe like that so I can like walk around the house with like that red, be like, look at me. I'm Napoleon. Napoleon. Right? I don't know. He looks good in that. There's not a lot of portraits where Napoleon looks good. But that is a fancy, fancy robe, and I kind of want it, like, hardcore. Even like the blue, I don't know. It just, whoever painted this did an excellent job. I really like it. I even have this painting saved on my phone. That's how much I like the folds in the velvet. It looks so good. I like it. So kingly. Now, I don't mean all this white stuff up here. That looks uncomfortable. But this red right here, that's classy. You can make something real classy from that. Why don't people dress like this anymore? I don't know. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of velvet, but he's working it. That's all I'm saying. So during each stage of his, the steps to become emperor, Napoleon takes a vote. The people willingly elect him into these positions. This demonstrates that he had the support of the French people. I mean, people like war heroes, and man, he was a war hero. He saved the French Revolution. He's the only reason why the Prussians and the Austrians didn't destroy the French Revolution. So eventually, he will end up with the title of Emperor of France. Now, it takes him a little while to get there, but eventually he will get that title. So he's slowly working his way to that. So he kept many of the ideals of the French Revolution intact in the beginning, and that's part of why he gained so much popularity. And I do genuinely believe that he believed in these ideals, at least in the beginning. I think that he changed a little bit because absolute power corrupts absolutely. But all this to say, as far as dictators are concerned, Napoleon's not a bad one. Napoleon is no Hitler, not even remotely. Napoleon, I would actually say, is a pretty good emperor. And there were, like with Rome, there were a few good emperors. But the problem is, who comes next, right? Who's going to take over after you're gone, and are they going to be good or as good? And if you're looking at Rome, the answer to that is definitely not. And I don't think France would have been an exception to this. Fortunately, not really given a chance because Napoleon, his son, does not become the next person in charge. Don't want to spoil it, but we're getting there. So you supported laws that would strengthen the central government and achieve some of the goals of the revolution, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. He's for all of these things in the beginning, at least. He sets up an efficient method of tax collection and established a national bank system in order to improve the French economy, aka he's fixing the problems that were the problem before the French Revolution, the third estate being a tax. Well, now we have a more efficient method of taxing that isn't going to punish the farmers as much. Taxing will be equally spread out. He's addressing the issues that people wanted fixed. And looking at Maximilien Robespierre and a lot of the different forms of government that went through France during the French Revolution, none of them were very good at this stuff. Maximilien Robespierre, they wanted to abolish religion, like Christianity, Catholicism. They made it to where there was 10 days in a week, so you wouldn't know what day Sunday was. Napoleon's like, that stuff's all crazy. We don't need the reign of terror. So I'm gonna be in charge, but I'm gonna keep the French Revolution ideals in place, and we're actually gonna solve the problems that you wanted to have solved with the taxes and all that stuff. Now, it's not all rainbows and sunshine. This is all of his more positive things like public schools and educating the public are only going to apply to male students. That to say that in this time period, in all cultures, Asia, Africa, Europe, America, you're not going to have gender equality. So he dismissed corrupt officials, and in order to provide the government with trained officials, he set up government-run public schools, which again were only open for male students. Now, probably his biggest accomplishment is the Napoleonic Code, which was his set of laws to help govern France and manage a lot of the injustices. And the people like this. He did a good job. It's a pretty good code of laws. He's very proud of it. Of course, he names it after himself because, you know. And in all reality, he's probably not the one who actually wrote it. He probably had a group of people write it with him, you know. But he, of course, being the emperor or king at this point, is going to take, well, of course, he's not going to use the title of king, but he basically is. He's going to take the credit of writing it, of course, because why not? Now, as he gets older, he's going to realize that some freedoms get in the way of his power, such as free speech. And I think that, you know, we can really understand this in 2020 because, I mean, you look at Donald Trump, I'm sure that he would love to make CNN and NBC take a chill pill if he could. Because during this coronavirus thing, it's like they're looking for reasons to get people angry at him. Like they're grasping at straws. He's calling it the Chinese virus. It came from China. We call it the Spanish flu. It's not racist. You're just saying where it's coming from. It's not racist. But the media latches onto that so that people hate him. And you know what? People can hate him if they want to. But we can't deny that the media is maybe exaggerating things to cause more hysteria. Even with just the coronavirus, I think they're definitely exaggerating things because they want you to watch their channel because they get money off of that. So I'm sure that we can understand where Napoleon's coming from, where he wants to limit free speech. Not that I would ever, under any circumstances, support the restriction of the freedom of speech. But that doesn't mean that from Napoleon's perspective, I don't understand where he's coming from, right? You ever met someone, you know, this little picture here, that's like, stop interfering with my freedom of speech. You know, they're yelling so loud about their freedom of speech that they actually are preventing somebody else from speaking. I've known quite a few people like that. Like, you're a bigot, you're insensitive. I'm yelling because my rights are more important than yours. There's people out there like that. I always kind of want to smack him in the face, but you can't because rules are rules. So Napoleon will control prices and encourage industry, built roads, and supported public education. And, you know, as an American, that's like, you controlled prices? That's kind of messed up. Like, government shouldn't be that much in controlling industry. But, you know, in his case, bread was so overpriced. And from his perspective, you know, he did fix the problem. But again, that's not me saying, hey, dictatorships are good. Because again, Napoleon was a good emperor. But what about the person that comes after him? Probably, statistically speaking, no. And then you're stuck with a bad dictator and no rights. Just saying. And you have no voice. And if you speak out, you get killed. Hashtag Russia. He will use the Napoleonic Code that emphasize Enlightenment ideals such as equality, religious freedom, and merit advancement. And that's a big, very important point, is that Napoleon is very, very good. He's very Machiavellian. He's very good at showing people like, hey, look over here, you get freedom, freedom. And then over here, he's doing what he's distracting people over here and doing what he actually wants over here. And again, he's labeling it Granny's peach tea. Like, he's like, hey, I have all these Enlightenment ideals, but you don't actually realize I'm taking your rights away. They do this. I mean, you look at really any dictatorship, they do this. It also made the male the head of the household and forced women to give up some of their rights that they had during the revolution. Because Napoleon is a little bit sexist, if I'm being honest. You know, even him specifically. But again, in France, if the king or monarch or dictator didn't have several mistresses, it was like, what's wrong with him? What's wrong? Like, are you okay? So yeah, I mean, his idea of women in modern day standards would be pretty terrible, but for back then in France, it'd be completely normal. So in 1804, we're in the 1800s finally, Napoleon decides that he wants to become labeled the Emperor of France. So the French actually vote and support this idea, and he is crowned Emperor of France by the Pope. Once again, I have that epic painting there because I just really think he's killing it. Even that crown of leaves, which is definitely a reminiscent of the Caesars, right? The Roman Caesars. So you can kind of see Napoleon's ego and his idea of himself and how he's wanting to portray himself coming out through this. So Emperor Napoleon didn't think it was enough to be Emperor of France. He's going to seek to expand his territory even further. If you haven't noticed, Napoleon kind of has this pattern where he wants to achieve as much power as possible, and that's exactly what his game is. That's exactly his angle. You know, he's kind of like Alexander the Great, in that he's just going to keep on trying to get more and more and more and more until he can't get any more. And so he's raised, as a question, well, I want to expand France's territories for the glory of France, but armies cost money. And we're, slowly getting out of the debt from, Louis XVI and his predecessors' idiocy, but we don't have enough money to start a war. So how are we going to raise that money? And that's going to come in the form of the Louisiana Purchase. So Napoleon loses French territory in the Americas through the sale of the Louisiana Purchase. He looks at all this land that they have recently acquired. What you see here in the brown. And he's like, I have all this land that Britain wants to take from me, my sworn rival. And there's this country you call the United States of America that we helped gain their independence. And they would love to own this land, and they'd probably pay money for it. And then they would defend it. I don't really have the troops to go and defend it from the English. Maybe there's a win-win-win here for us. So he sells the Louisiana territory to Thomas Jefferson, who was the president of the United States at the time. And Thomas Jefferson, this is going to actually go down as one of his greatest achievements. America pays Napoleon sells it to us for a pretty good price. And it's a lot of land. So America wins, France wins, England loses, which from France's perspective, Napoleon's perspective, and America's perspective is a win. So realizing that he could not defend that North American territory from the Canadian British, Napoleon decides to make money off of it instead, and he sells it to the Americans. So, just kind of go through all the bonuses here. Napoleon gets to make his money. He no longer has to protect territory that he has almost no gain from the British. So he doesn't have to fight a war with the British. He gets to take off the British. He gets to solidify his alliance with America. He gets to make money off of it to fund his army. It's a win-win-win-win-win for Napoleon selling us the Louisiana Purchase. So the Brits had their eyes on this large area in North America and wanted to capture it to keep their pesky rivals, the Americans, from doubling their size. But Napoleon's like, bam, I'm going to sell it to Thomas Jefferson. Screw you, England. Let's do this thing. And that is the end of Napoleon Part 1. So for today, one of the worksheets I gave you is labeled Napoleon Early Years. Do that worksheet, answer the discussion questions from this video in Canvas, and you're good for today. Have a lovely one. We will finish Napoleon Bonaparte the rest of this week. Peace out. Kind of. Forgot about that. Anyway, now officially, peace out.